prophecy conference going on in Oklahoma City right now, and was looking at their website, Prophecy Watchers, and a lot of Well, today we're going to talk about expect the unprecedented. I've been doing this for a while now, as you know, long before YouTube was invented or we figured out how to use YouTube. I've been talking about these things for probably close to 20 years now, if not over that long. Almost every week now, I think I've never seen a week like this where there's so much that I could talk about. And I could do a seminar on just small segments of what is going on. We talk about the convergence of events, and it's absolutely stunning. Now, I wasn't here last week. I was speaking at a Moriel Canada conference, Moriel Ministries Canada, and this was, the title of my talk was, one of my talks, was the Vegangelicals. Now, so just so I haven't triggered any people out there, because I posted this on my Facebook page, and immediately there was an argument about whether you should be vegetarian, vegan, or meat eater, and all that. And that wasn't the point. Okay, there's a theological point to this in that, Paul says that, I wish that you would desire the meat of the word, but I'm only giving you milk. And the point of it is, vegangelicals means today, a lot of churches, they're not giving meat. They're not even giving milk. And so this cow here, someone suggested, should be called, it's not a Holstein, it's a Jolstein cow. Because you don't even get milk from a Jolstein cow. Okay, so now let the judging and arguing begin all over again. But listen, some of the clips you would have seen before if you've been watching the YouTube channel and things that I talk about that are going on in the evangelical church today. I kept the talk to about an hour, but I had to leave a lot of stuff on the truck, so to speak, that I could have backed a truck of examples up. And each week, as I look through what's going on and what passes for the evangelical church, I could talk about that every week and give you example after example. I use Jude chapter 3. There's many other passages that we could talk about. I mean, here's an example today. This is Jen Hatmaker. She is a very popular woman speaker, calls herself a pastor, very good friends with Beth Moore, Rachel Held Evans, some other popular women in the so-called evangelical church. And she posted this week. This is just an example. I'm a 3 married to a 2. I discovered all this in the last 24 hours. And then there at the bottom, see what she says? The Enneagram gets in your head, man. Now, the Enneagram is a rank, new age assessment tool. It was offered by Andy Stanley's Catalyst Conference to pastors and leaders. And so far as I know, there's only been a few people that have spoken out against the fact that this shouldn't be being offered to evangelical pastors. They should be warning to stay away from this stuff. And so here is this popular speaker. She had a show on HGTV or something about, redoing a house. I mean, I can't believe. Have you noticed HGTV? They redo houses on HGTV. Have you noticed that? And so she's a 3 married to a 2 because that's the score that's the category they fall into in the Enneagram. Now, I have to tell you, I don't know what it is in my own personal marriage. I don't know what number I'm married to, okay? I do know that things like this go on in our house. This morning. She said, I just washed those, sweatpants of yours yesterday, and you have peanut butter all over them already. And I'm like, well, I did you a favor. What? Yeah, now you don't need to ask me whether I had anything for breakfast. So, and you know exactly what it was I had, so you're welcome. So we don't do the Enneagram in my house, probably because it would be too frightening, especially for one of us. So here's another example. This is an article in BuzzFeed, a very, very long article about Bethel Church in Redding, California. This is Bill Johnson, Chris Val-Lawton, Todd White's there a lot. Jesus culture, music comes out of there. And it's about a 10,000 person church in a town of 90,000. And they have a school of theology, School of Christian Spirituality or something. I can't remember the name of it. They themselves call it Hogwarts for Christians. This thing is I'm not sure how to say this. It is a fraud. It is a blight on the body of Christ. This is splitting up families and churches, and with this mixture of what mysticism, whatever it is that they got going on. And they have conference after conference after conference. They charge for stuff if you want to watch it online. It's a money machine. They're building a huge church. They're talking about $90 or $100 million that they're going to build in this small community. You need to avoid this. And they're planning churches all over. I think there's one here locally. And I think it's down in Grove City. Well, I don't even want to say where it is. It's someplace where you should find out where it is and then don't go there. Is the best advice I can. This thing is wrecking families and faith and churches and Christianity. And they have conferences. These guys all show up at conferences. Bill Johnson, remember the clip of him going and endorsing Todd Bentley? Okay. And from a number of years ago. And they do conferences, Heidi Baker and Cindy Jacobs, and there's another conference coming up soon with all these guys, and Michael Brown is going to be there. It's just, so avoid that. So anyway, that was a little bit of what I talked about at the conference up in Canada. It's beautiful. I mean, Vancouver has got to be close to, if not the prettiest city on planet Earth. It's just absolutely gorgeous. The people were great, except for they don't sell unsweetened iced tea anywhere. And if you get it, they don't have the little pink packs that I like to use. So, but aside from, it's really weird because you're 8 miles across the border, but it's like, it's different. It's a different country. And it's just a little bit different. So, but it's still a great place, great people. We had met some wonderful, wonderful people. Pray for the believers in Canada up there. There were a couple people that told me that they had lost their jobs because of their stand on Christianity, because they've enacted things in Canada about what people can and can't say. And, I've seen cases of people even having their kids, the parents being investigated, the kids taken away for time to be investigated by social services because they're teaching them Christianity. And I'm just telling you, it is different up there. But it's sort of like a laboratory of what we might expect here. I'm not going to talk too much about this Vegas thing because I don't know what happened. I mean, I know what happened. A lot of people got killed. It was terrible. I talked to a friend of mine who has a number of friends in Southern California. His best friends, the wife of his best friend, her brother and his wife were killed as they were sitting there at the concert. Another couple Couldn't go at the last minute. They sold the tickets to, I believe, somebody in their neighborhood, and they were sitting in the seats that these people had, and both of them were shot in the head and killed. So, I mean, this had real life consequences, and it's very complicated. It's very chaotic. People running around shouting things, and having investigated, incidents like this in my career as an attorney, it takes a while to sort things out, and they keep changing the timeline and it's clear that at best there was bad communication. Still don't know if there was just one person involved. Personally, I find it hard to believe that this guy got all that stuff up into his room without some kind of assistance. And he's putting up security cameras. And there's been two places I've been in my life where I felt that I was being watched extensively. And that was Las Vegas and Israel. There are cameras all over in Israel, and they do that for security, and the same way in Vegas. It's just hard for me to believe that, I mean, the hotels are big, they're busy, but that somebody's getting massive amounts of weapons and gear up into his hotel room is a little hard to believe without help. I want to talk about this, and this goes with expecting the unprecedented. This thing in California is just absolutely shocking. Here are just some headlines about the fires up in Sonoma County and Napa, north of Santa Rosa, up near San Francisco, or north of San Francisco, wine country. They're still not out of the woods yet. There's still a lot of fires raging. Some of them are only 10% contained. The pictures are just, to describe the pictures as anything but apocalyptic. I mean, even look at this one article from the San Francisco Chronicle the other day, hoping for normal in a surreal time. As I went through the news this week, we have Las Vegas, we have these fires, we have a hurricane that's approaching Ireland, which is, I think, kind of unusual. It may not be a hurricane when it gets there, but I don't think they have hurricane building codes in Ireland. It's not a place where they get that many hurricanes. The hurricanes probably didn't do as much damage in areas here because of the building codes that came in after Hurricane Andrew. I think down in the Keys, houses that were built according to the new codes were pretty much left standing, and the old houses were pretty much destroyed. So pray for the people in Ireland. I don't think they're necessarily used to it, a storm particularly of this kind. And we don't know how strong it'll be when it hits. But the point of all this is that when you turn on the news and people keep saying, what do they say all the time? This is unprecedented. We've never seen this before. What's going on? And I think at some point, people have to think, and the church has to say, God's telling you a message, sending you a message that things aren't going to be the same way that they were. I don't even talk about the economic things that are going on. I mean, the stock market's at record highs. All of these things are, everything's fine, right? And I talk to people in banking and that type of thing, and they're fearing essentially a financial apocalypse. They just don't know when. So, and it's insane. Here's an example and the government does things and they don't anticipate the consequences. So Julian Assange, whether you like him or not, they froze his bank accounts and he had some money. So what did he do? He went over and invested in Bitcoin. And so now what's happened? Bitcoin has gone, the stock market has gone here. Bitcoin's like way up here. And he says, thanks, government, for forcing me into this investment because I'm got a lot more money and funds now than I ever thought I would. So all these things have consequences. Here's a picture of Disneyland down in Anaheim. They had some fires in the Anaheim Hills. Here's a young girl surveying her neighborhood in Coffey Park in Santa Rosa. that neighborhood, that picture has kind of gone viral on the internet. Here's a picture of Coffee Park neighborhood. Look at some of these, I mean, these photographs of these, and they're running through neighborhoods telling people you have to get out now, you don't have time. Here is, this is again a picture, I believe, of Coffee Park. It's a neighborhood of about 300 homes in Santa Rosa, and it's gone. I mean, it's just, look at this, it's just destroyed. Here's a drone shot of it. This is a helicopter shot on the left. This is a drone shot of the neighborhood. This is some of the fires going on at that time. And it's just, it's shocking. I mean, it really is. You know, I mean, we've seen neighborhoods leveled by tornadoes around here, but I don't think, even people out there saying we've never seen anything like this. It's just, it's apocalyptic. Somebody ask a question? Well, how do the trees stand? I mean, you know, they're green. And look, there's some strange things that happen in fires. I mean, I saw a picture of the inside of a tree burning. But, you know, these redwoods, you go through these big redwood forests out there, and the trees stand through fire after fire after fire because they have some protection for it. But don't mistake the fact that what those trees look like. Hey, look, weather does weird things, okay? I was in Chicago once, and we were getting ready to go down Lakeshore Drive, and we saw a funnel cloud coming up Lakeshore Drive. So we're pretty bright guys, my client and I, and we thought that we shouldn't go down there. So we drove under an underpass, and the thing kind of went over top of us. And then we drove down Lakeshore Drive. I was going out to Midway Airport. And down there around Buckingham Fountain and the Field Museum and everything, there were these giant oak trees that had been picked up by the storm out of the ground, and the entire root system of the tree was exposed. But most of the leaves were still on the tree. Now, I know what I saw. I saw giant oak trees laying on their side, their entire root system exposed, dirt all over the place. And most of the leaves, I would say 90% or more of the leaves that were on the tree before the storm went through were afterwards. How did that happen? I don't know. You know, I saw the results of it. It's an interesting phenomenon. So there are strange phenomena that happen in these natural disasters. Here's some of the cleanup. There's hundreds of people missing. And we've seen in just the last month apocalyptic event after apocalyptic event after apocalyptic event. And everybody's walking around saying, most people that are thinking and paying attention are wondering what is going on. What has happened? Now, that's aside and apart from what I consider to be the apocalyptic events going on in culture. Let me give you an example. There were a number of years ago, Dan Brown, he wrote a book called The Da Vinci Code. Now listen, you might think, oh, you know, it's just a book, it's just a novel. How influential could it be? And that book was designed through his story to undermine the foundations of Christianity and the historicity of Jesus Christ. And I did a number of weeks debunking the book or responding to telling what the book was about and why it was not matching up to the Bible. And he's written a couple of follow-on books, so they're in the same kind of vein. He has this investigative art guy that goes out and picks up all of this evidence, and then he uses that to further his agenda. It's not too dissimilar from what the guy who wrote The Shack did. Don't tell me that that's just a novel. If you think it's just a novel, one, you need to wake up, and two, you're not paying attention to what the author of The Shack himself has said about his own book. And Eric Barger, he did a series of things on his Facebook, which are really pretty good about The Shack. The guy's got a TV show now on TBN to try to teach his theology that he laid out in The Shack. William Paul Young, or I think is his name. Okay, so here's Dan Brown. Oh, it's just a novel. Listen, The Shack sold 25 million copies. That is huge. Enormous number of sales. Remember the Left Behind series. What did it sell? I think all the books combined sold somewhere around 80 million copies. Purpose-Driven Life, which was, for years, it sold 60 million, I think. Dan Brown's books, about the 4 of them, the first ones he said nobody bought. I couldn't even sell them to my parents. Over 200 million books he has sold. 200 million. That's on the order of Harry Potter books. Now, I don't know how much he's worth, but if he gets, do the math, if he gets $5 per book, and somebody, when you get that big, you're going to get a fairly good number. That's $1 billion. And he's built this kind of fantasy land and everything. But listen to what he says. He got a new book out now called Origin. And here is his comments. This is from a Reuters press release about his book release just recently. Humanity no longer needs God, but may, with the help of artificial intelligence, develop a new form of collective consciousness that fulfills the role of religion, U.S. author Dan Brown said on Thursday. Origin was inspired by the question, will God survive science, said Brown, adding that this had never happened in the history of humanity. Are we naive today to believe that the gods of the present will survive and be here in 100 years, Brown told the PAC news conference. Somebody get me a bottle of water. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all share a gospel loosely, and it's important that we all realize that, he said. Our religions are much more similar than they are different. Well, kumbaya. And here's another one. Listen to this. Turning to the future, Brown said technological change and the development of artificial intelligence would transform the concept of the divine. We will start to find our spiritual experiences through our interconnections with each other, he said, forecasting the emergence of some form of global consciousness that we perceive and that becomes our divine. And I will tell you, this sounds a lot like what the guy that wrote The Shack says. It's this emerging new spirituality. And if you don't believe it, you need to wake up and pay attention, because this stuff will destroy the faith of your family and your kids. And this isn't like chipping away at it. This is like a sledgehammer launched against Christianity, the foundations of Christianity. Our need for that exterior God that sits up there and judges us will diminish and eventually disappear. What did I title this? Expect the unprecedented. This stuff didn't happen 10 years ago. And with the development of artificial intelligence and this desire to build the perfect human and altering DNA and all this other stuff, this is Tower of Babel type stuff. I could talk, trust me, I could talk weeks on this. The stuff that I review, I don't even have time to edit it to bring it here to share with you. I have so many videos that I've watched, but I just don't have time to edit them down to give you a summary. And these conferences are taking place all the time. Every week, 2 a week, 3 a week, there are these conferences on artificial intelligence and technology and 5G. And I'm just telling you, the way it's developing and the fact that it's developing so rapidly is just absolutely mind-boggling. But what do we expect? Oxford University used to be was founded as a Christian university. So this week, they banned a Christian group from going to the freshman fair because it might alienate students. It might offend them some way. So a historically Christian university bans a Christian group because it might offend the people that are coming in. Is that a problem or not? It's a huge problem. The Christian Union of Oxford's Balliol College was initially banned by an event organizer who felt that students might feel unwelcome due to what he calls the Christian religion being an excuse for homophobia and neo-colonialism, the Times of London reported. The Times of London is like the major newspaper in England. Potts added, Christianity's influence on many marginalized communities has been damaging in its methods of conversion and rules of practice and is still used in many places as an excuse for homophobia and certain forms of neo-colonialism. The logo of Oxford University, that in the Bible there, you see the Bible? The Lord is my light is what it says. And now, all of our universities, I mean, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, were all founded as religious institutions. And similar things have happened at every one of them. Do you think your kids are going to... And that's why I did that thing on the evangelicals, because the pastor that I used, the main example was, your kids are going to go to college and hear it's not true, and hear the Bible's not true, and the stories are myths and that type of thing. And so, you know, we don't base everything on the Bible. We base it on who Jesus is. Well, how do you know who Jesus is without the Bible today? It's a capitulation to the culture. One of the most influential pastors in America. It's stunning. Here's this. This is from the Daily Mirror. How much do you know about World War II? A survey reveals some people think the UK and Germany were on the same side in World War II. So I'm going to guess some of them went to Oxford. So here's Melanie Phillips doing an interview on Australian TV a couple weeks ago where she talks about how did we get here?
Now, what has fascinated me has been the kind of this weird marriage between the left and Islam. Now, you've lived in London. You wrote a brilliant book, Londonistan, about the rise of Islam through immigration, Muslim immigrants pouring into London, and it turned London into what you described as Londonistan, a book I'd tell everybody to go and read. Talk us a little bit through that thesis.
Well, what happened in Britain was that it became culturally, I think, very confused, and the West has followed. But I think Britain was a leader in this. Britain became secular faster than other European countries, and it therefore lost touch with the bedrock principles upon which Western civilization is based, which are basically biblical principles. And in turning against those principles, it lost sight of various basic ideals, such as truth and lies, and above all, it lost touch with and, in fact, denied that there was anything superior about Western civilization. And in that state of mind, it became vulnerable to the idea that you couldn't be in judgment over anyone who was in the developing world, any culture from the developing world, because they had the same status as the West. And as a result of that, it was unable to see the threat from radical Islam. It opened its doors to it. It was hospitable to it, and remains in that state of confusion even now.
Melanie, you're touching on this question of whether discrimination is a positive or a negative thing. And certainly in the ancient world, people would have described someone of discriminating tastes. Even in the modern world, somebody who could differentiate the valuable from the not valuable. We seem to be in a mad scramble to entirely evacuate any judgment about value on cultural questions.
I think that's right. I think we've got ourselves terribly confused. I personally passionately believe that one should stand up against bigotry and prejudice and true discrimination. But because we have become confused, we no longer understand that there is a difference between discriminating wrongly against people and standing up for values which, unless we stand up for them, will disappear. Unless we in the West say that the West is better than the rest, because in the West we uniquely believe in the equality of all individuals. We uniquely believe in equality for women. We uniquely believe in freedom of religion and in the freedom to have no religion and other basic principles that we uniquely believe in political freedom and in democracy and so on. Unless we stand up and say those are better than the rest and we must uphold them, then we are going to fall victim to precisely what we've done, which is to say that we're not standing up for that, and therefore we become confused, and therefore we allow people who stand for the opposite to have kind of equal parity with us. And that has muddled the situation completely, so that as a result, in Britain, and I should say, although you mentioned that I have a place in Jerusalem, I spend my time between London and Jerusalem. In Britain, we have allowed a situation to arise in which we have seen the development of a parallel jurisdiction, a parallel set of laws, Islamic laws, governing Muslim communities. Now, in the West, it's an absolutely cardinal principle. It's one law for all. You cannot have a democratic, liberal Western society that does not understand that the same law applies to everybody. And consequently, in our desire to be nice to a minority, we have allowed ourselves in Britain to undermine the basic bedrock of a liberal democratic society, which is one law for all, by allowing the development of Sharia law and a separate or parallel, informal jurisdiction to develop.
What she's saying is that, my opinion, these fires are a representation of what's happening to values in our culture. They've been leveled. I'll give you an example. The high priestess of the New Age, there was some belief that she was going to play God in the shack, which is, I think, the role she really wanted, but they gave it to somebody else. This was in Oprah magazine. Now, look, I don't read Oprah magazine, okay, so don't come asking for my man card after church or anything today, but there was an article there in May, I think it's on page 110, Parker's Choice. How a doctor's Christianity led him to perform abortions. This lady is a Christianity wrecking ball. A lot of people believe she's a Christian, because she did tour with Rob Bell. How bad could she be? Well, she did a tour with Rob Bell. That's how bad she is. And he did a tour with her. Listen to this. Alleviating needless suffering is a Christian's sacred responsibility. If God is in everything and everyone, then God is as much in the woman making a decision to terminate a pregnancy as in her Bible. That's exactly the theology of the shack. That's the theology of Dan Brown. That's the theology of Oprah Winfrey. It continues. As a devout Christian, about this Parker guy, and one of the only physicians performing the procedure in the Deep South, Parker refuses to see the moral high ground, making an impassioned case rooted in science, history, and theology for the sanctity of a woman's autonomy over her own body. Unbelievable. But look at our culture. This is Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winner for economics. And if they gave one for unhinged political commentary, they would retire the Nobel Prize on this guy. So from now on until he's gone, who do you think he's talking about? We'll take a little quiz here at the moment. I'm going to fire up my computer computer every morning in a state of existential dread. Who do you think he might be talking about? Trump? Oh, yeah, you're right. Surprise. Joy Brown at MSNBC. Paul, I wake up daily with the exact same dread. He is spiraling downward, and he clearly means to harm as many people as he can on the way. Look at what's happening in our culture. I don't have time to go into detail on this. Opioid crisis. I saw an interview on NBC the other night, NBC News. They interviewed a teacher, first grade teacher in, I don't even know where she was. It was either California or Ohio, someplace. She talked about, if I understand correctly, having to tell kids your parent had an overdose and died today while you were at school. About 4 times in the last year or two of school. One teacher. You see, when a culture loses its mooring, it seeks anything. I saw there was a guy arrested at the Amtrak station in Omaha, Nebraska the other day. He had 15 kilos, 33 pounds of fentanyl. It was enough fentanyl to give a deadly dose to every single person in the states of Iowa and Nebraska and kill them with one dose. If that package had opened up, one of those packages that opened up in that train station, it would kill the people. I mean, you've heard the stories of police going out on these drug overdoses and them themselves having a drug overdose. Expect the unprecedented. It talks in the Revelation about they're tied up in their what? Sorceries, their pharmakia, their drugs. It's happening. Here's California declares hepatitis A emergency. California Governor Jerry Brown declared a state of emergency. By the way, this is them in a neighborhood in San Diego sterilizing the sidewalks so people don't get hepatitis A. I believe 18 people have died. Hundreds have been hospitalized. He declared a state of emergency Friday because of a hepatitis A outbreak that has killed at least 18 people in the state. Federal health officials said last week that even with the efforts to slow the spread of the disease, California's outbreak could last for years. Uh-oh. Here's Mark Stein talking a little bit about it. And so, fires in California, hepatitis A outbreak, and Harvey Weinstein scandal. I'm not suggesting there's a connection. Here's Mark Stein.
That is actually the Harvey Weinstein story, and to a certain extent, that is also the Clinton Democrat story too.
Well, it's literally the Bill Clinton story. It's literally so.
That's right.
What is this psychological transference? Is the people who are committing the crime accusing their opponents of being guilty of the offense because it's somehow a way of expiating their guilt? I mean, why is it that people always accuse, the left always accuses its opponents of doing the exact same thing they're guilty of? Have you noticed this?
Yeah, well, I think it's actually worse than that, because if you notice the things that the left gets annoyed, if Mitt Romney, who is nobody's idea of a sex fiend, and he happens to say that as encouraging women to apply for a job, he phrases it rather clumsily, and he says binders full of women. All these late-night talk show hosts, everyone, he's a punchline for 2 weeks afterwards. Dear old decent Mitt, because he's a stiff who stands up when a woman enters the room and holds the door for her as she leaves. Meanwhile, they're completely heartless about the huge mountain of human debris piled up by this Hollywood pig over the last 3 decades, and I think it goes to the fact that they're actually willing. It's the old line about communism: you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. Right. And in this case, Harvey Weinstein's the guy who made Shakespeare in Love, and if he were talking to Shakespeare, he'd say you can't make a Hamlet without breaking a few chicks. This is the necessary collateral damage.
No,
this is the necessary collateral damage as they see it.
So
Right.
you are seeing, even now, we could not get anybody from Los Angeles, and I know a lot of people out there, to come on and talk about this. You got to kind of wonder, at what point does Hollywood come clean and admit that Harvey Weinstein is not an aberration? He's not, I mean, he may have been the most piggish guy you've ever heard of, but he's not an anomaly out there. I mean, do we ever get to kind of reform that culture?
Well, I think that's very interesting. I mean, Harvey Levin was saying a couple of minutes ago that there's no actual crime here yet for the FBI to investigate.
Just rape allegations, no big deal. Yeah.
Well, but there are certain other oddities here. For example, the Miramax head guy in Italy was a guy who knew nothing about movies and was paid 400 grand a year to procure broads for Harvey Weinstein. That's ultimately, I don't know whether that business expense went to the revenue agency in Italy or here in the United States under the parent company Disney, but that's certainly something to investigate.
Listen, this could go on. And the details, I can't even talk about the details of what this man did to people. I did like Mark Stein's comment about, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And since he made this Shakespeare movie, he would say you can't, make a Hamlet without breaking a few chicks. I think it's a great line, and I think it summarizes exactly what it is. So we know this meeting took place between Loretta Lynch and President Obama on the tarmac, or Bill Clinton on the tarmac. Just happened to both, have their private jets there and get together for a while. And they said there was no documentation about it. So Judicial Watch has asked for it. And in another case, and the FBI came in and said, swore under oath, there are no documents. So in another case, they're looking at this stuff and they find this report. 30 pages of a summary of what went on in this happenstance brief meeting that nobody remembers what happened on the tarmac in Phoenix. So you have corruption here in all of our centers, media, politics. You have this massive corruption. And I have some more that we're going to get into. But so Heritage Foundation has done a couple things. Here's the first thing. This is Dr. I think her name is, I think it's Gatrella, something like this. She's the president of the American College of Pediatrics, which was an organization set up by her and Dr. McHugh, who used to be the psychiatric chief at Johns Hopkins, where they did the transgender sex reassignment surgery. And they stopped doing it because it didn't work. And they found that the people that they did this on were like 20 times more likely, and don't quote me on that statistic, 20 times more likely to commit suicide than the people who didn't have the sex reassignment surgery. And look, this is a real problem. So they did a thing on gender dystopia. I'm going to play just a couple brief clips of it, and I'll fast forward through it. She's talking about this giving, the question was, should we give puberty blockers to children that are struggling with this? And now, summary in advance, her position is this is child abuse. We don't even understand the implications of this. There's no science for it, yet has become accepted norms.
Parents were great parents. They were super parents. But when Andy was 3, he went from being an only child to having a sister born with special needs. The mom and dad were great parents, but his sister needed a whole lot of care and attention. And Andy internalized, and not every child would internalize this way, but for Andy, he did. Mommy and Daddy love girls. If I want them to love me like they did before, I have to be a girl. It's not conscious. It's all subconscious. Now, here's what would happen today. Today, Andy's pediatrician would refer Andy and his family to gender specialists or a gender clinic. The parents would immediately be told, this is who Andy is. Why? Because here's how you diagnose a transgender child. The child must consistently, persistently insist that they are not their biological sex. Bingo, done. You were born this way. Parents, you must socially transition your child, change his name to a girl's name, and ensure everyone else treats him as a her. Because if you don't, he will grow up to commit suicide. The experts work with the family, the school system, and shepherd this child along in this confusion until they approach puberty, at which point, oh, now we must put you on puberty blockers. Because if we don't block your physical development, your child will become very anxious and depressed as the facts of their biology develop. So we want to block them, arrest this development so that we can give the child more time to think. Now, mind you, puberty blockers also arrest brain development, but you want them to think more clearly. Now, what the experts don't share with the family is this is an off-label use. It's not FDA approved. And by the way, when we use the puberty blocker, Lupron, to treat prostate cancer in adult men, it's associated with memory problems. And we found similar findings when the Lupron is used to treat certain gynecological issues in women, adult women. We've never had long-term studies on puberty blockers being used in biologically normal children. This is experimentation. So they start with the puberty blockers, and this physically isolates the child because what's happening to their friends around them? Their peers are growing up. They're being more psychosocially isolated as their peers develop along the normal pubertal trajectory, and they do not. So, we must put them on the cross-sex hormones. What are the risks of cross-sex hormones? So a boy, Andy, would be put on estrogen. If it were a little girl, her cross-sex hormone would be testosterone. These are serious drugs. They, over the lifetime, raise your risk, cardiovascular disease, so cardiac stroke.
Okay, long clip. Look it up on Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. It's about an hour long. I mean, there's a couple other doctors on the panel. Here's some of her other remarks during the panel discussion. This one might need to be turned up because I think the volume's a little bit lower on it.
Chemical castration, which is what you are doing when you put any biologically normal child on puberty blockers, is treating puberty like a disease, arresting a normal process, which is critical to normal development, bad for kids. Sterilization, not good for kids. Prepping them for what will likely result, in the case of girls, double mastectomy at 16. Not how you treat depression or anxiety, and I have plenty of experience treating teenagers with depression, anxiety, even suicidal depression. Indoctrinating preschool kids with the lie that you can be trapped in the wrong body. Again, that's disrupting their normal reality testing and cognitive development. Those things are abusive. As to the studies, there are two that I am aware of which claim that affirming your child's gender confusion is good for them. Number one, it assumes that coaching a child into a fixed false belief is mentally healthy. Science doesn't allow you to assume your conclusion. Number two, those studies are extremely small. Number three, those studies are very short term. And number four, the control group of mentally healthy children are the siblings. Most of them were siblings of the trans-identifying child. Oh, and there's a number five. The parents were the ones evaluating the mental health of the children. This is not science. I don't think you need to have an MD or a PhD to know that's not science. That's ideology masquerading as science. Okay.
Well, you can look at, this is where we are. And so what Melanie Phillips said, listen, the Bible tells us that this is what's going to happen. You get away from God and his principles and everything becomes massively confused. And so there's a spiritual battle going on all the time. We know that from Scripture, the war in the heavenlies and high places. and it manifests itself on the earth, and we see all of these events taking place, and I can't discount the fact that this is what it's a manifestation of what's going on in the spiritual realm. And this is what they're doing to these kids is just absolutely, I almost have no words to describe what's going on. And so pray for this brave lady who with Dr. McHugh formed this American College of Pediatrics to fight this. And she says in her talk that I've gotten calls from physicians in the LGBTQ community who say this is crazy what we're doing to these children. But political correctness is trumping them, even their concerns. So they formed this pediatric college because the regular pediatricians have caved, by and large, on this issue. She told a story, little girl, 5 years old, California. They had a coming out ceremony for her little male friend who was becoming a boy. A little girlfriend who was becoming a boy, and they had a big party in kindergarten to celebrate this. She came home and went in the bathroom sobbing. Why? I like being a girl. I don't want to become a boy. Don't make me become a boy. We're traumatizing these kids. And the morons that think Harvey Weinstein is the greatest thing ever as a movie producer are the ones that are influencing the culture in your kids. And they're destroying lives physically and spiritually. And I'm upset. And you should be too. And it's about time we have more pastors get up and rail about this, because it shows the fallen nature of man and what happens, and what's going to happen not going to happen, is happening, and will get worse in the near term as man elevates himself to God, and God sort of pulls back that whatever restraining influence there is. I'm not sure there is any anymore. It's pretty much anything goes. Oh, we have these fake things about everybody's upset about Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts. If anybody ever talks about it, they won't even come on. They're so brave, they won't even come on Tucker Carlson and talk about it. So a couple things going on. Let's look at the Middle East. And since I got a little bit of a late start, I'm going to go for about 15 minutes or so. And if you have to leave to get your kids and everything, I apologize, but you can watch the rest online. So, great news. The U.S. and Israel announced that they're withdrawing from UNESCO. I mean, UNESCO's done enough, right? They say that, and Pam and I were in Hebron a few months ago. Hebron's in Israel. Hebron is where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah are buried. And UNESCO comes out and says in a big meeting, and everybody votes, it's a Palestinian holy site, not really connected to the Jews or Israel. And so the Trump administration says, through Nikki Haley and everything, we're done. We're out of here. We're not sending you any more money. Benjamin Netanyahu says, we're out of here too. So UNESCO is recircling the wagons, so they appoint this lady, Frances Audrey Aquilar or something is her name. She's French, and she's appointed as the new head of UNESCO. They had a massive, they came very close to having a guy from Qatar become head of UNESCO. Now, do you think that the holy sites in Israel would have been changed back to, yeah, those are Jewish holy sites if the guy from Qatar came into place? So it's very interesting as the analysis in Jerusalem Post this morning about how she came about to do this. She's French, and of course we know Macron and this ridiculous thing of Macron walking on water. You know, I mean, I think that those feet right there, I think that might be Obama. He used to walk on water, okay, if you want to continue the metaphor. So listen to what the Jerusalem Post says this morning. The Macron effect came into action with Azoulay benefiting from Macron's popularity in the global arena and his fresh, determined image. The U.S. decision to pull out of UNESCO also played into the hands of Paris, enhancing the Macron effect. To the international community, Macron represents the exact opposite of U.S. President Donald Trump. He is young, level-headed, champions collective diplomacy, and respects the international bodies, which is exactly what the doctor prescribed for UNESCO at this time of crisis when its credibility and budgets are at rock bottom. Listen, you have a credibility problem because you're doing moronic things. Stop that and your problem would be over. I'll tell you what, I'll apply right now to be head of UNESCO. I'll do it as my retirement, part of my retirement. Azoulay, who is Jewish of Moroccan origin, will face the difficult task of trying to persuade the United States and Israel to remain as members, as well as tackling the allegations of anti-Israel bias. Now, that's in either the Jerusalem Post or the Times of Israel. Well, here's another thing that happened. This is in The Economist that talked about trying to establish a new world order. And I don't have time to go into that. We'll try to get to that next week. And if I ever get around to doing a midweek thing. But here's an interesting article from Gates Stone. I think these guys do a great job. Why there is no peace in the Middle East. And listen to just a couple of these conclusions. There's why peace is not possible in the Middle East because values and goals other than peace are now more important to Middle Easterners. Most important to Middle Easterners are loyalty to kin, clan, and cult, and the honor that is won by such loyalty. There was no group and no loyalty above the tribe or tribal confederation until the rise of Islam. With Islam, a new, higher, more encompassing level of loyalty was defined. All people were divided between Muslims and infidels, and the world was divided between the Dar al-Islam, the land of believers in peace, and Dar al-Harb, the land of unbelievers in war. Following the tribal ideology of loyalty, Muslims should unite against infidels and would receive not only honor, but heavenly rewards. It's a brilliant article. Go to Gates Stone Institute and look it up. But we do have good news to announce, and you see this in this article that I showed you earlier. There is somewhat peace in the Middle East between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Rival parties announce unity deal. So this is great news, and there's a lot of articles about it. Let's see. Don't have time to go into the Stratfor prediction. Someplace I have an article. Oh, here it is. So here's a summary of some of the things in this peace agreement. The Palestinian Authority will be empowered to carry out fully its responsibilities. And somebody leaked, a leak to the media. I know it even happens over there. And they posted it on social media. There aren't really many secrets anymore, in case you haven't noticed. The Palestinian Authority government will be empowered to carry out fully its responsibilities in administering the Gaza Strip as it does in the West Bank by December 1st. They're supposed to not have terror attacks in Israel. Border crossings in Gaza with Israel and Egypt will be transferred to the Palestinian Authority by November 1st. Palestinian Authority security leaders will go to Gaza to discuss ways and mechanisms to rebuild the security services with relevant parties. A meeting in Cairo will take place in the first week of December to do this. Now listen, there's 6 clauses here, and everybody's touting this as this agreement is what? Unprecedented. So we'll see how it plays out. Goodness, I have a lot. If you would, because rather than me summarize it, you'll hear from their own lips. there was an interview on Secure Freedom Radio this week. I think it was on Wednesday. Frank Gaffney interviewing several men. First, he interviewed Bill Warner, PhD physicist and mathematician, who has studied. He has a politicalislam.com is his website. He really does a great job of communicating what's going on with Islam in an understandable fashion. Go listen to that interview, because in that interview, they talk about these two reports that were done by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, for Caliph and Country, exploring how British jihadis join a global movement, and Milestones to Militancy, what the lives of 100 jihadis tell us about a global movement. One of the conclusions, for example, in the Caliph and Country study was, our sample reveals how the British jihadi network is connected to the global movement through direct activities overseas and support for international groups from within the United Kingdom. And it talks about how, everybody says, and our government for a long time has said, the Muslim Brotherhood, that's the way we're going to get all this peace and all this other stuff. And Bill really puts the lie to that. The next interview that Frank Gaffney did was with Phil Haney, my friend Phil Haney, who talked about these two studies as well and the implications of them, and that even though he said you need to get, Phil, to summarize, said you need to get over the notion that they're radicalized online. It's happening in the mosque and in the networks that develop through the mosque. And it may be why Phil's not working for the administration now, because he speaks the truth about this. Trump also this week, so get that. And then there's another guy, Dakota Wood, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. So Trump's coming in, and he says, we're going to get rid of the Iran deal, or we're going to, Congress, make it better. Now, the problem is, negotiating with the Iranians is a futile task. It's not going to work. Okay, I'm just going to predict. I don't care what he does. It's going to fail, and we're going to have a problem. And we're going to have a North Korean problem with a really aggressive religious ideology behind it. Now, I understand Ben Rhodes. He was upset. He was the children's book writer who became Obama's foreign policy expert and advisor. He was and he was the architect, one of the architects of the Iran deal, where they got all this money. And I don't even think the Iranians have signed this thing to date that I'm aware of. And they got $150 billion. They're using it to develop, guess what? Nuclear technology and missiles and that type of thing. And there's bleed over of that technology to another country that's doing the same thing, called North Korea. And it's a problem. And so Trump's trying to, and the New York Times front page this morning is like, Trump's taking the Obama approach. He can't get anything done in Congress, so he's going around Congress. And we don't like that. I mean, I had never heard a peep about it during the 8 years of the Obama administration. And I challenge everyone, what does Congress do? Does anybody know? I know they get nice pensions and they have nice dinners. I'm serious. I mean, I think I'm fairly politically astute. I read lots and lots. And I would stand up here and tell you the achievements of Congress, like if there were any. But I'm just not aware, so please inform me. I'm sure there's some things that get done. The lights are staying on, so they at least appear to be paying the bills. There's conflict all over. Let's look at this. Hindus attacking Muslims and killing them on the streets in India over, the Muslims eating cows. 189 people killed either yesterday or this morning in a truck bombing in Somalia's capital. And there's an insurgency going on there. We have problems in Afghanistan. There's also this study that came out. You can look it up. It is called Anti-Semitism in Contemporary Great Britain. Now, one of the things that they talk about there is whether the contention of a lot of people, including myself, is that if you're anti-Israel, state of Israel, you're more likely to be anti-Semitic in your actions. And a lot of people say, oh, no, that's not true. There's good reasons to be anti-Israel, state of Israel, but that doesn't make you anti-Semitic. And you can be anti-Zionist, but not anti-Semitic. And other people say no, and they go hand in hand. So this study has gone through and tried to find out whether this is specifically true. And you can freeze it here, and you can read the summary from this report. But look at some of these things here. I mean, you've got a very big chunk of people that in Britain, which is really probably the best of the European countries, I guess, in terms of how they feel about the Jewish people. Here's another long survey. Like the state of Israel has every right to exist. So 26% strongly agree with that. 36% tend to agree. A lot of people don't know. They neither agree or disagree, or they just don't know or refuse to answer. And there's only 6% in the survey that say that they strongly disagree that the state of Israel has the right to exist. And these are very interesting findings. But essentially what they're finding is this: a clear majority of the British population is not anti-Semitic in any way. However, the greater level of antipathy towards Israel, the more likely they are to register on the Anti-Semitism index. Indeed, of those scoring 4 or more on the Anti-Israel index, it is more likely than not that they hold some antipathy towards Jews. Big surprise. Next time I'll do the study for half and give you the conclusions in advance. In short, we find that in the population as a whole, there is a 3 in 10 chance that individuals selected at random would hold to some level of anti-Semitic sentiment. Among those who hold no antipathy towards Israel, that would drop to just over 1 in 10. However, among those holding the strongest level of anti-Israel views, that possibility climbs to over 7 in 10. So and you know what? This is really one of the first studies that's ever come out and did this. In the interview that I showed you with Melanie Phillips, if you go to melaniephillips.com, you can see her talk a little bit about this. And then it talks about how Christians feel, and big surprise, Christians have a better view of Israel than most other groups, particularly Muslim groups. I know that's shocking, but this is an editorial in this morning's New York Times. White nationalism is the real existential threat to the West, not jihad. Now, this is a picture of Donald Trump being burned. Now, is this a Hillary Clinton fundraiser? Is that where that happened? Was it a Bernie Sanders event? Was it the Democratic Congressional Committee, lunch that they have when they're not doing anything else? This actually occurred at a state funeral in Iran. And we want to negotiate now with them. It's insane. Export warns if Trump scraps the nuke deal, Iran could quickly build the bomb. We have the Kurds and Iraq are in a flashpoint situation. There's this article that's talking about Newsweek. It came from a blog post by Elliot Abrams on the Council for Foreign Relations, Foreign Affairs blog, the coming confrontation between Israel and Iran. Now, I'm just going to ask you a question. Are you aware of any place else that that's discussed? A confrontation between Israel and Iran or Persia? It's a rhetorical question. The answer should be obvious. Yes, it's discussed. It was discussed 2,000 years ago in Ezekiel that Persia would be one of those countries that would come against Israel in the last days. I'm going to have to talk about this. Global Trends, Paradox of Progress. This is a publication that came out. This is the, I'm trying to remember, it's from the National Intelligence Council. It came out earlier this year, but if you look through the index, about the map of the future, trends towards transforming the global landscape, near future, tensions are rising, 3 scenarios for the distant future, islands, orbits, communities. What the scenarios teach us, fostering opportunities through resilience. It's a pretty well done piece from the NIC here in America, and you can get it online. I'll try to post a link on my Facebook page if I remember. If not, I'm sure somebody will remind me. And the findings in it are pretty stunning. And it shows essentially a lineup of the way the world is and what Bible prophecies say the world is. And it goes through and it assesses, Yeah, it assesses threat levels. And I think I forgot to put, this is not from that report. This is from a report released just in the past 10 days. The Heritage Foundation released a report. It's called the 2018 Military Index. And you can go, they had about a 3-hour seminar about it. It's all available on YouTube. And we'll talk more about this because it goes through the various threats. You see down here, it talks about, are they severe, high, elevated, guarded, low? They're all high, but threats to U.S. vital interest. And those threats are Russia, Iran, the Middle East terrorism, China, and North Korea. And the other one was, Afghanistan, Pakistan terrorism. And those are all high and elevated. It then goes through and it assesses how the United States is militarily ready. Now, on Frank Gaffney's show, they had just a brief 10-minute interview with Dakota Wood talking about this. He's the editor of this for the Heritage Foundation. And I have to tell you, it is, and I've confirmed this with some military people. So one, I'm not running down the military. Okay, we have great people in the military. I mean, phenomenal people. We have some that have tended here for a while. They're in the military. Phenomenal people. But is the military ready? And Dakota Wood's point was, in order to do a two-front war, we need to have essentially 31 or 35 Army brigades ready to go. We need to have roughly 33 Marine divisions ready to go. So how many Army divisions do we have ready to go? 3. How many Marine divisions do we have ready to go? I think, if I recall is what he said in the interview, 1. Our aircraft are wearing out, our ships are wearing out, and there's new anti-ship hypersonic missile technology being developed and shared by Iran, North Korea, Russia, and it's changing the landscape, and China. And so we would have trouble sustaining one severe conflict, let alone 2. Our military is at the lowest levels it's been since before World War II. It's not being funded. I know somebody in the Air Force, and they said that of the Air Force fighter squadrons, of which there are to be 12 or 20, 3 are ready to go. 3 are combat ready. And so you know why the president this week was talking about our missiles and why they needed to be upgraded, improved, and all that other stuff. It's shocking. It's frightening. In the aggregate, the United States military posture is rated marginal and is trending toward weak, a condition unchanged from the 2017 index. Why? I mean, when's the last time they passed a budget? When's the last time they funded this? And everything else, there's all this stuff that's distracting us from real threats. And so here's the state: weak Army and Marines, marginal Navy, Air Force, and nuclear. It's a shocking thing. And I'll have to do the rest of this stuff later. We're in kind of a desperate situation. Here's the Palestinians just joined Interpol. Defense Minister Lieberman said, in the next war, Israel will face fighting in the north and the south. And I guess I would say is, you better not rely on the United States. When the next campaign begins, and it doesn't matter where it begins, in the north or on the south, it will immediately become a two-front campaign. There's no longer a single front, and that is our basic assumption. We're preparing the army for that, he said this week. And also regarding the Lebanese front, we are no longer talking about Hezbollah alone. We are talking about Hezbollah and the Lebanese army. Regrettably, that is the reality. The Lebanese army has become an integral part of the Hezbollah apparatus under its command. The defense minister said that Israel's northern front now included both Lebanon and Syria, where he predicted fighting against the Jewish state would be coordinated. So, what do we do in this situation? I saw a video post by Amir Sarfati this morning, and he went to Liberty this week, Liberty University, to talk about Bible prophecy. And I appreciate his honesty. And he said, I'll summarize, he was shocked at the reaction of the students. Now, Ed Heinzen, Randy Price have been professors there for years. I think the LaHaye Institute is there. And the kids don't care. I mean, and it's heart-rending. I mean, what Amir said, and I have every reason to believe him 100%. I trust his judgment. And he was shocked. I mean, he was visibly shaken talking about it. And this is one of our leading Christian colleges. What do you think it's like at Harvard, Yale, Ohio State? How about that? Bring it home. Otterbein, Ohio Wesleyan. So when Daniel faced this, he's a good example. And Daniel and I've talked about this before. He was reading the book of Jeremiah. Isn't that amazing? Daniel, who wrote part of the Bible, was reading the Bible. And here's the other thing is, he believed it. He believed in Bible prophecy. Because he's reading the book of Jeremiah and he says, wait a minute. He comes to the part and says, I came to Jeremiah the prophet that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And so what did he do? Well, he figured out, hey, that 70 years is just about up. I mean, because I was a kid then, and now I'm in my 70s or whatever. You know, it was 70 years ago. I remember being brought here. And it's almost over. So how do we react? And I think Daniel's reaction is what we can expect. Just a couple verses. We have sinned. He got down and he prayed and he repented. We have sinned and have committed iniquity and have done wickedly and have rebelled, even by departing from thy precepts, from thy judgments. Neither have we hearkened unto thy servants, the prophets, which spake in thy name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongeth to thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespasses that they had trespassed against thee. O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of... Now listen, do you see any parallels between, say, America or Great Britain or Europe or Australia in what was going on to the people? And so when judgment came, there was mass confusion. And what do we have in our culture today? Mass confusion. We can't even talk about whether somebody's a boy or a girl. So maybe our reaction should be like Daniel. Let's pray. Father, bless us as we go this week. We just pray that you will help us to take to heart the wonderful nature of the truth of your word and the lessons that it teaches us and how to walk and live our lives today. Just like Daniel, I pray that you would give us a spirit of repentance and submission to you and our desire to learn about you through your word. In Jesus' name, amen.